So there's a video of these three kids who are at a Walgreens, and what they do is that they actually shoplift from the store. And there's video footage of them trying to get out of the store. They were locked in, and they're saying things like, like, bitch, if you better open the store in, like, 10 seconds, and they count down from 10. One of them does. Another person that was like, saying, call my mama, and then some other person was like saying, like, bitch, get out the way, or other things like that. So, and one of them like took like one of like the it's just like, I think, like, it's like, like a folding board where you put signs on or whatever, and they were just moving out of the way. It looked like they're about to throw it or something like that. Um, but it's definitely, very, very, sad and unfortunate, because there's also two follow-up videos. I believe there's a story where their mom or their sister appears on camera and justifies their behavior, and then they're kind of like retorting and saying stuff like, like, oh, like, people are saying that we're broke and wherever, like, our parents make more money than you, fuck you, eat a dick, and other things like that. Like, definitely, like, it sounds like these kids watch one too many episodes of the Boondocks, watching Thugnificent, because he would say the exact same thing. But it's definitely, very unfortunate, because, this perpetuates a lot of black stereotypes. Like, first of all, you see, if people don't read it closely, they see a woman with them. So there are people who can look at that and say, okay, this is just, they can have a misinterpretation that this is a black woman with three kids, even though that's the older sister. So a lot of times what happens in the black community is that there are a lot of single mothers. So when videos like this happen, there could be a misinterpretation that she's the mom and she's allowing her black kids to act like gangsters, because there is a stereotype in the black community of no fathers, of mothers who don't know how to raise their children right, or some mothers encouraging their children to be, like, to be Ronald Freeman or whatever. But it's a bad look on all black people, because it perpetuates a lot of stereotypes of of like no home training, profanity, stealing, and justifying and whatever, really. So it's unfortunate that that happened. And then also too, when you have other people appear on camera, especially older people can misinterpret. And as I said, people can misinterpret the sister as the mother and be like, hey, you know what? This is just another situation of why black women can't be parents. Like, as I work at a hospital, so there are situations, and that does happen more often than not, that when a black child is born from a black mother, in many hospitals there are more probabilities of them taking the child away, really. And sometimes it's because there's stereotypes that black women have mental illness, or those are stereotypes that black women don't know how to raise their children, or black women want to have kid after kid while they're in poverty, really. So these videos do help reinforce those stereotypes that African American women are the worst mothers, and that's a stereotype. There are plenty of white people who are horrible parents. There's plenty of Asian people who are horrible parents. The other thing that I want to say about this video is that it perpetuates a lot of stereotypes of black kids stealing. So when you have Trayvon Martin get shot by George Zimmerman, or other like black men get shot by police or beaten up by police or whatever, these videos are just fuel for all that hatred against African Americans. So why behave like a stereotype? The other thing about that is they speak broken English, cursing every 2 seconds, argumentative, disrespectful to adults, really. So it adds a stereotype that black children are rude, or black children can't speak English that correctly. Like, they can't say a sentence without cursing every 2 seconds, like Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction. So sometimes when you engage in this behavior, it reinforces a lot of negative stereotypes. And there's people like me who are part African American who are ashamed and disgusted at black heritage. Like, sometimes when I have to take like a physical exam, or whenever I sign government document, I put other, not black, because I'm disgusted and ashamed of this behavior. Like, I'm ashamed to have any black heritage because of all the times I've seen these videos, or I've dealt with like ghetto thug behavior in my life, really. So you are making your race look bad by doing stuff like this. But I will also say too, like, I met many I've known like this girl in high school who lies about being sexually assaulted and other types of crimes, really, and her white mother encourages her to do that. So an example of a white stereotype, lie about being raped. I've talked about some issues with the 40-hour film project, and how there's some white privilege and racism that I've dealt with. I've seen like there's definitely in Japan, there's trains just for women because there's an issue of people grabbing women's butts or pulling down their skirts or pulling down their underwear. So when I say there's issues in the black community, there's issues in every community. But this is all bad stuff. And yes, it's true that when we're children, and I do agree with this, that sometimes we engage in bad behavior and we're unapologetic really because, we're more impulsive, or we may just have more anger issues, or we may just, develop a mentality, and it happens in psychology where we develop a mentality to do bad things really because, part of being a kid is just to be impulsive. Um, when I was a kid, yes, I did shoplift a bunch of times. Yes, there was a school store, and I did steal money from that. When I was a kid, I used to vandalize property. When I was a kid, um, I've done other things that were not okay, really. So yeah, I've definitely behaved like a hood nigga and a hood rat at one point in my life, but I don't engage that behavior. And these kids probably should learn, start young, really. Don't be a stereotype like this. And then the other thing I want to say is that they're just like some people who, I think what they said, something like, they feel like they could do it because everybody steals, or they're entitled to do it. And a lot of people say they have no home training. And I think what I want to say is that there's a lot of times in life where people get out of jail free cards. So some people may say, oh, well, blame the mom, give these kids a pass, or they deserve passes because everybody does criminal activity in their life. Yes. But you can't give people passes. You have to hold people accountable for their actions. Because I'll mention this. I was misdiagnosed with autism. I'm not autistic, but I remember a few years ago, left a job under bad situations. My parents wanted me to sue my job for mental health discrimination. They also wanted me to talk to the human resources and say, hey, you know what, maybe you should agree to take medication and keep the job, really. I remember when I got into high school, my parents stopped being strict on me. They were always either about medication or they were about using the mental illness get out of jail free card. I remember in college, I got in trouble, almost expelled one time. And same thing, my dad just called my dad, talked about it. He said, why don't you just, use your mental illness card? And I remember doing that, and they said, okay, we're going to let it go, but you had to talk to a psychiatrist, the last 2 years of college. So it kind of trained me to be like, okay, for many years of my life, use whenever you do wrong, mental illness, get out of jail free card. But I don't do that anymore because, when I've dealt with some situations and I've faced my consequences like a man, that matured me really, because it taught me that whatever I do, there's consequences. Same thing with these kids, really. Quite honestly, if I could do anything, if I could create any consequence for this, if this is a real video, nothing staged, not a skit, really, I would say, okay, they need to be removed from their parents. Their parents need parenting classes, and they need to be put on juvie or whatever, and you add up the amount of money that they stole, really. I mean, worth of the products that they stole, and you're like, okay, you're gonna spend that amount of hours in community service, or maybe military school, or I do believe they should have military school programs for children with behavioral issues, just to kind of teach them the right way, really, because they need to be held accountable, and their parents need to be held accountable, because you have kids that are glorifying stealing, and if you have older relatives appearing on their videos and being like, hey, you know what, we're not broke, you're misinterpreting us, whatever, and they're kind of combative, not apologetic, there's some issues. It's adults justifying behavior, or adults being like, okay, well, I'm mad about this, so therefore I'm not going to focus on this behavior. Because like I said, there are plenty of times, and we know this when it comes to black kids, that there's plenty of times when this could lead to 3 of them getting bullets in their heads, and and a cop getting away from it. Or there are many times too where again, they may steal here, but then in a couple of years they may steal from somebody who's in a gang, whether it be another black guy or another person, and a person of another race, and they get shot, really. And then again, there's also ghetto experience trauma, which means that when you have experience with a black person who acts like a thug or a hood nigga, people just get more like scared, and people may develop trauma, or people may feel like resentment towards black people. But like I've said before, there are plenty of women who are sexually harassed by men, and there's plenty of women who don't lose trust for men or hate men because of it. It's all the same thing, that when you do these behaviors, you create problems. Like, I've actually known people who are trying to start a movement of, when you have sex with a black girl, you should wear a condom every single time, because putting a black life into the world leads to more black gangsters and whatever, really. But it's unfortunate that some people look at these videos and it creates more racism, but part of it is stop with this black ghetto indignity. It's not cute. You know what? Start young, really. Which means that, you know what, if you see a lot, if you realize, hey, everybody steals, everybody breaks the law, you know, everybody acts entitled, or there's so much disrespect and whatever out there that people do, you know, why just give into it? You know, I worked at a job, I was sexually harassed, I was almost assaulted by a black man who was acting like a ghetto ass nigga, and I remember like losing a lot of, I remember becoming a little bit like him in certain ways, because my job seemed to like be like, hey, you know what, if you behave like him, human resources protects you, but if you have integrity, you work with people like that, really. So, you know, so yeah, like whatever you do is a representation of not just yourself. It could turn to a representation of other people, and then also too, that sometimes in life, yes, that's true, where there's injustices, or where you know that everybody steals, everybody does wrong, really, you know, but it doesn't give you the right to be like, okay, well, since that's how the world works, I'm going to justify my bad behavior, because, you know, there's a lot of people like me who have learned the very hard way that, you know, just because the world's unfair, you can't justify bad behavior. Or sometimes if bad people don't get punished, why become another bad guy, you know? So it's unfortunate, it's fake toughness, and it's bitch behavior, really, you know, because, you know, again, it's also dangerous as well, because like I said, you know, in some places you get shot for doing that, and some places you get shot for doing that, and especially because of, you know, like, there's still racism, there's still racist cops, and that's not good. Or sometimes kids go along, keep doing this, and then they do it to the wrong person, or they start breaking the houses, and they get shot and whatever, really. So it's unfortunate. I hope that they just change their ways, really, you know, and I'm not perfect either, you know, like, it took me until 34 years old to turn my life around. And other things like that, you know, but being a ghetto ass hood nigga and whatever is not the way to be.